people are now starting to realize that the apps are not doing what they need to do because the people on there are not genuine. They're not intentional.
No one's taking it serious. It's just either a way to hook up or people, maybe they want pen pals. We could have did that 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Okay. What do you propose, or how do we get back to making dating fun again? Hey y'all, welcome back to the Mother-Daughter Mixtape, where we talk love, life, and lessons learned along the way. I'm Charmaine.
And I'm Jada.
And welcome back to our podcast. And in today's conversation, we're talking about dating. Not just dating in today's world, but dating in different eras. Dating at my age, dating at Jada's age, dating when I was Jada's age. So there's a lot to be discussed there, and I am so excited to jump into this topic. So
yeah, so grab a drink, get comfy, and let's hit play on today's episode.
Boom.
So before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick check-in, see how you're feeling. How's things? How's life? Anything new?
Life is good, generally speaking. I've been traveling recently, so that's always a good thing.
Pictures is fire.
Listen.
Fuego, thanks to the photographer right here.
She's multi-talented. Multi-talented.
Let's
so
get into it.
Yeah, so recently just got back from a trip and looking forward to the next one already.
Yeah.
Of course, there's always something on the books. So that's pretty much what's going on with me. What about you?
Yeah, I'll say the same. I mean, we went on the same trip together. So
You have to tell them that. I was trying to be a little coy about it as if, but okay.
And me and my mom will be traveling. So
We do.
yeah. We did just get back from a trip, an amazing trip, had a great time.
Yes.
Y'all know we love to travel, so no complaints there. But yeah, it was just, once we got back, it was, focusing on the podcast and things like that. So that's where a lot of our energy and time has been. But yeah, like you said, life is good. No real complaints. And yeah, just happy to be here and happy to have a conversation.
We could complain, but what's the point?
What's the point? Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So make the best of what life is and keep it pushing. So that's what we tend to do. And I like that about us.
Yeah, I agree. So to kind of just go ahead and dive into today's topic, let's talk about dating as, like she said, members of different generations. So like my mom said, she is a member, I guess you could say, of the the Generation X, which are people who were born in the years of 1965 through 1980.
I'm so old. I don't know why, but how am I in the same category as somebody born in 1965, first of all? I was born in the 70s. I know it's not that far off, but it just sounds... Honestly, look, can we take a pause?
Go ahead.
My pause is, okay, if you watched, hopefully you did, our intro episode, I mentioned that I was 48, or that I am 48. I kid you not. For some reason, to me, 50 still sounds old. Don't y'all come for me in the comments, because I'm literally knocking on the door of 50, but...
You felt that way for some time, though.
I had pretty much my whole life. I have felt like 50 is just like that number, and I don't know why. Like, when I turn 50, I'm probably still going to be like, I feel like this is old, even though I don't necessarily feel old.
Yeah, and I think that also, like, age is just... It's a mindset.
Of course, for
Age
sure.
is a mindset. Like, yeah, people say it's just a number and things like that, but it's also a mindset, because it's a lot of people that say, didn't you tell me somebody on the trip said that they are 50 in their mind, they're in their 20s, but their body tells them every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Yes, my body tells me that I'm 48 every day, but do I feel mentally and even emotionally, or just, in how I think, or just, I don't know, just how I get out and do stuff and, remain active.
Yeah.
When I think about, like, or at least when I was younger, when I thought about people in their 50s, the generations before me, that 50-year-old doesn't look like 50-year-olds today.
Right.
So it's a very different dynamic. Okay. Time in. I'm sorry. I just had to put that out there.
No, but I kind of, I like where we're going with this too, because even, like you said, from a perspective of like just age then versus now, there probably weren't a lot of 50-year-olds that were riding bikes and things like that. Like if y'all watch the last episode,
Right.
something that she shared was that, she rides motorcycles and things like that. And I don't see that being something that you'll give up anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. So, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. And I think about it every day. Maybe not every day, but, often enough that I'm like, okay, in less than 2 years, I'm going to be there. What is that going to feel like? And what is that going to look like for me?
Yeah, only time will tell. But again, I think it's a mindset. And when people have that like negative, I guess, outlook on the age, that's where it kind of starts to really take a toll, or
Yeah, it seemed
whatever
to
on
go
people.
downhill or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you own your age, and don't let it dictate like, oh, I'm 50 now, I have to start doing this, or I have to stop doing what I was doing when I was in my 40s. Like, life goes on, and it's
Yeah.
not about like once you turn a certain age that you just automatically start doing new things, and you just flip
Yeah.
on a dime or something like that. Like, life should be fluid, I
Yeah,
feel.
for sure. But I will say that the older you get, the less you care about what other people think. So there's that. So
That's a good
I ain't gonna care
thing.
what y'all gonna be saying in 2 years when I'm 50. So it is what
She's
it
still
is.
gonna be wearing them bikinis at the beach, and I'm gonna
And
have to tell
will
her, reel it back in, Grandma. No tea, no
listen,
shade, but
mind your
yeah.
business.
So yeah, so like I said, you're in Gen X, people born in 1965 to 1980. And my generation are people in Gen Z, which are people born in 1997 to 2012. So when you say that,
Same thing, right?
yeah, but from the aspect of I'm with the
Yeah.
babies, like I feel like I almost more so resonate with people that are millennials, which are the people before me, which is like 1996 to I think 1981. So I feel like, even though I was born in that later time in the 90s, and people be like, oh, you barely made it, it's like I just resonate with millennials more from
Yeah.
like a TV perspective, the music, like everything pop culture and retro and, generational things like that. I just resonate with people like that, because the people that were born in 2012, they the ones that's on TikTok shaking their hips, not me.
Listen. Yeah, it's actually kind of funny that you say that, how I'm like tripping because I'm in the same category as people that were born in the 60s, and then you're on the opposite end of that
Right.
spectrum. So I think that's actually pretty funny how we think alike, but just kind of it's an opposite dynamic there.
Yeah. So I want to talk a bit about, what things were kind of our normal for us growing up in our generation. So what was something for you as you were growing up? And it could be anything. Like, I know last episode we talked about like you had pagers, and you would tell me about your like your car phone and stuff like that.
Oh
Like,
my
what were some
gosh.
things that you had back in your day?
Yeah.
Ooh, back in your day.
Just date me, why don't you?
That we just don't see now.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny that you bring up like the pagers and stuff like that. Listen, if you had a pager or a cell phone, and this is like in the mid 90s. So I'm in high school. I graduated high school in 1994. So early to mid 90s, and then mid 90s while I was in college. If you had technology, I'll just say, meaning, what was that face for? Like
Because technology, period, is kind of crazy.
well, back then we didn't have, I mean, we had laptops, but they were so huge and
Heavy.
heavy. Yeah. So we didn't have, I'll say, cell phones. We had what I would call car phones.
And
Now,
landlines, right? Y'all had landlines at that time too. Right? Right?
yes, we've had landlines, I'm sure, since, I don't know, the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
Like,
You was able to call people. That's listen.
anywho, what I'm saying is like the cell phones that we have today, like my first cell phone, car phone, well, I'll call it a car phone because you actually had to plug it into the cigarette lighter. And we don't even have cigarette lighters. Let's start there.
And it's so crazy because when y'all do talk about cigarette lighters, I be thinking that y'all be talking about those like car plug-in.
Yes, that's
No.
exactly.
So they light cigarettes?
Yes, that's what they were for prior to. Yes.
Oh no, that's insane.
Yes. Back in, because everybody smoked in like the 70s and 80s.
Ew.
And yeah. Anyway, yeah, everybody smoked back then. So I'll say most. When I say everybody, it's a generalization, right? But yeah, people, or car manufacturers made cigarette lighters where you like push the thing in, the whatever the lighter in, and it heats up. It's like a heated coil or something, and you put your little cigarette on it and it lights your cigarette. Well, after, go ahead.
So you had to light the lighter to put it up to the.
No, so it had some type of mechanism in it where you push the lighter into whatever that little
The
thing.
lighter was already built in, basically.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So you're not physically lighting something,
Okay.
but it basically heats up the coils in whatever that mechanism is.
That sounds dangerous.
I think it technically is. Like, I couldn't imagine current modern cars having that.
Right.
Anyway, I digress. So what I'm saying is my car phone at the time was plug-in, and you plugged it into, I'm sure it probably wasn't a cigarette lighter at the time, but it was, you know, those things. We have like USB and stuff like that today. We didn't have that back then.
Yeah, I remember even back, I want to say the Camry that you had, it didn't have a USB because
No.
we had to use that car
Yeah.
charger and then plug it in via the car charger
Yeah,
to charge
that car was a
devices.
2007. So that was, what, 17 years ago?
Yeah.
So anyway, we didn't have technology back then like we do today. So how do we communicate and, how do we stay in touch? Well, first of all, we picked up the phone, but we had pagers. You go to the, I was about to say go to the cell phone, go to the payphone, put your little quarter in or whatever, or you go home or go to someone's house or whatever and you call back, but you didn't have the liberty to just whip out your phone out of your pocket or your purse or whatever. We didn't have that luxury back then.
So when you were calling people on payphones, though, like, what if they miss your call and then they try to call you back? Then what?
Then I guess it's a cat and mouse game at that point, because what are you going to do? You're not going to sit by the payphone, and they're probably like, there was no caller ID. So it wasn't like they knew what number you were calling from.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so
You-
weird. Like,
I'm just tripping at the fact that I don't know how revolutionary this is.
it is, because it's like, it just sounds very monotonous.
Antiquated. Yeah.
Yes, old.
In today's age, yes. But growing up in those times, getting a pager was like a major, listen, it was the drug dealers and the criminals who had pagers back then. So if you had one,
Them
either
80s, baby.
people thought you were a drug dealer, or maybe that you were dating a drug dealer, which I never did, by the way. But yeah, it was a major deal to have some type of communication device, whether it was, the big bag phone. That's what we called them. That was basically like a cell phone, but it was huge. It was heavy.
What would you even carry it in?
You carried it on it had a strap. You would carry it
Oh my
on your shoulder.
No, that's
Yeah.
so cringe. Okay, so if you wanted to like go out with your friends, so you call your friend on your payphone, you want to.
Well, you would do that from home, or you would have already talked about it in school.
Okay.
So then you go home and ask your parents, like, hey, like, you plan ahead. So you're probably talking Monday, Tuesday, if you want to go out like Friday, Saturday. Okay, we want to go to the movies, to the skating rink, to the football game, whatever. Like, you've already made those plans and talked to your parents. So by the time that day gets here, you will have already done that. It's not a spontaneous, hey, y'all want to go out tonight.
So when you get to the game after you already done planned it, how you find each other? You just walking around the school looking for each other until you find each other?
I mean, it's just easy. I don't know. Like, you just kind of show up and you just kind of find your way. Or maybe you already had like a section where you typically hang out, so everybody knows to go to that section, or, so.
There's a lost art in that, I will say. Like, I feel like, especially like you describing that right now, it just painted a whole picture in my head, and it just gave like a 90s film in my head of like, you call your
Boys in the
friends.
Hood, like.
Yeah, like, yo, you trying to go to the movies on Saturday? Yeah,
Yeah.
bet, say less. Okay, I'll see you there. And then you just roll up in your little beat up Lexus, whatever,
I didn't
1995
have a beat up
Lexus.
nothing.
I'm not saying you, just whoever.
Okay.
My mom. One thing about my mama, she gonna have a car, y'all,
And it's gonna be nice.
and it's gonna be nice. But you pull up in your 1995 hoopty, not my mama, somebody pull up in your 1995 hoopty and wait for your friend to meet you in the locker room at 4 p.m. because that's y'all's regular spot or something. I don't know, but it sounds nostalgic.
I agree. I think, like you said, it's a lost art, and I think those days were special because we were on the cusp of technology being born and technology getting, I won't say to the point it is today, but it was just like the start of the internet and the start of being able to contact people outside of your home.
Yeah.
So,
So what did that transition look like for you once you started to see, like, walk me through those years for you as it started to progress from the bag phone across your chest to now you're starting to get internet and now you're able to like text people. Like, walk me through that.
yeah, that's actually funny. So that was more so like when I was in college. So back then we had what was called, I think they called them bulletin boards. So it's almost like a forum. And
Electronic or
yes.
okay.
So it actually, I think, was created by a group of students at some university. I don't remember what school it was, but some university where they had this project to basically learn how to communicate via the internet. So they would create these bulletin boards where you create a username. There were no real profiles back then, so you couldn't put your picture up. It was just words, and it was like a ASL. Do you know what? Like, okay, so like, okay, how old are you? Male, female, where do you
Oh
live?
man.
Age, sex, location. That's where it all started, was for me back in college, where you're on this bulletin board. And I remember talking to people, mainly guys, from all different states and colleges, because it was mainly for college students.
That's neat.
Yeah. So of course, we never hooked up or like met in person because a lot of those people, they weren't in the state of North. Of course, I mentioned that I went to A&T, North Carolina A&T State University. Most of them didn't. They weren't local, so they were in different states, which was cool because that was just revolutionary at the time. It wasn't something that people had talked about or had even experienced up to that point. So it was actually pretty cool to be able to talk to students from basically all over the country. But I would say that those were the first years for myself that I would consider that to be some form of internet dating.
Okay. And I mean, were those just lost contacts at some point? Okay.
Basically. Yeah, basically. Because we became, or I would say there's maybe two or three guys that I can remember. We were pen pals, basically. Like we exchanged addresses, like school addresses. So we would mail each other pictures,
Aww.
mail each other letters.
That is a lost art. Do you hear me? Like, I would fall in love with somebody once they started sending me handwritten love letters.
And that's what it was. Yeah, you weren't typing things up to
Oh my
print out.
gosh.
And yeah,
That's a lost art.
yeah.
Like, that's so interesting. So, okay, and then did you have any experiences where you met a guy on I guess ASL or the bulletin board or whatever? He sent you pictures, you got the pictures and were like, "Oh, he's cute." And y'all set up a date and went on a date or anything like that?
No, because I mean, at that time, again, we're talking about mid to late 90s. So this is like probably 95, 96, 97 time frame. And I was focused on school, honestly. Yeah. I mean, I was interested clearly in dating, but I was not interested in trying to have anything long distance or anything like that. But it was more, like I said, more of a pen pal type of situation where you just kind of get to know someone that way. And I will say, very interestingly enough, one of the guys, I actually saw him maybe 5 or 7 years later after that. And we met in person, but it was by happenstance. I was working at a job in Orlando. She was born in Orlando, Florida, by the way. I was working at a job there and he was interviewing and I saw the name. I'm like, that name seems so familiar. So I looked him up. Sure enough, it was him. And I introduced myself. I was like, you probably don't remember me, but I'm Charmaine, blah, blah, blah. He was like, oh my God. Like, it was just by happenstance. But, he was married by then. And, but it was just so interesting that this guy that I was a pen pal with that had sent me pictures, back. And he was cute too. He was cute. But that was just so interesting how that, how life just happens. The world is much smaller than you think it is. So.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. And I'm glad you shared that because that's the first time you've ever told me that story, by the way.
It might be the first time I've told that story to anyone.
Yeah. But it's so interesting just seeing like such a difference in, how you guys had to go about meeting new people and dating and things like that because you guys didn't have the most advanced or whatever technology. And it's just crazy to think as well that technology is still advancing even, now. So yeah, I just think that's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And even as I reflect back on that time, I'm even like tripping to myself like, man, that was revolutionary and you didn't even know it at the time,
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, just to kind of like speak a bit about what dating looks like at my point in my life that I'm in and for my generation, like it wasn't that we had to go through a transitional period with technology the way that you did. It was just like we grew up with technology.
Yeah.
So it's like my first phone, it was a flip phone still. Okay. But I was able, my first, oh my gosh, no, I'm thinking about my second phone, my very first cell phone. I had to get minutes. I had to get minutes and I would have to call because I'm pretty sure my dad got me that phone.
I remember that.
I had to call my daddy or text him, or I don't even know if I had to make you like hit him up and be like, I need some more minutes on my phone, daddy. Like, please, I want to talk to people.
That's
like,
so funny.
yeah. So even just thinking about that low key has me tripping too, because the fact that you had to get minutes to send texts and calls.
Listen, even probably, I don't know if I feel like this was probably before your time too, where you had your minutes, but it was free after 9 o'clock.
No. No.
So yeah, when like the very early days of cell phones and things like that, you had a number of minutes, like you said. They eventually started to have these packages where it was free after 9 p.m. or it was free after 7 p.m. So somebody call me back after 9. Like, I ain't got no more minutes. Call me back after that. You couldn't text. We didn't have texting back then. So you had to call me back after 9. Like, they knew, or if you were low on minutes, like they may not have known that you were low on minutes, but if they called you, if I don't answer, either call me back after 9 or you just pick up real fast and say, call me back after 9.
Before it hit a minute.
Exactly.
Get your 30 seconds.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. So my very first phone was a flip phone with minutes. My second phone, I don't think I had minutes on that phone, but that was the first time I was able to like surf the web and stuff on my phone. So that was a bit like, ooh, that was a transition. So I mean, yeah, I didn't have to, like I said, go through that whole transitional period. I mean, in the sense I did, because like the iPhone started to come out and get popular around the time that I was probably in like, really, I want to say elementary school, honestly. I remember when iPhone really started to get popular and stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't get my first iPhone until I was in middle school.
Yeah.
In, I want to say 7th or 8th grade, I had an iPhone 4. And that was like one of the bigger iPhones at the time, from like really being able to like have apps on your phone and like, and I mean, obviously other phones had apps and things like that, but just being able to text, call, and I was taking pictures and at the time I was wanting to be on Facebook so bad because all of my like classmates and friends were on Facebook. My mom did not let me have Facebook at that time, y'all. So
listen,
I made one behind her back.
How did that go?
I made one behind her back. I was posting here and there, and it probably only lasted for a little bit. It wasn't even long before you figured it out.
Listen, mama be on it, okay?
She do.
You have to stay on your kids. Like, those parents who, they're a little more hands off. I'm not here and never will be to tell any parent how to parent their children. However, I think give them their freedom to do, but guide them. And if I tell you no, I mean it.
She only gonna
Okay.
tell you once.
If I tell you no, I mean it. And it's really more of a way to see if you're going to respect. It's not even that I don't want you to do it. Are you going to respect what I'm telling you to do or not do? That was more my thing. So when
At
you
that age, that did not
clearly,
it did not click. It did not do anything in my brain because I had strict parents, y'all, whether they believe it or not. My mom and my dad were both strict on me when I was growing up, and I didn't get the freedom that I really wanted until like I was 16-ish.
well, let me just say that I don't regret being a strict parent.
Oh, and I wouldn't have it any other way either, honestly, because I was raised right. Let's start there. And oh, that's probably what I was gonna say is that like with that not clicking for me at that age was just like all I knew was that my parents were strict. I wanted something and I was going to do what I wanted in order for me to get it at that age. Like as I've gotten older, I've come to realize like, you probably shouldn't have done that and, things like that. But when you're that young and your frontal lobe is not developed, honey,
Yeah.
you don't be thinking about that kind of stuff. You just know that you want something and you're going to get it in some kind of way. And especially with you and my dad raising like a spoiled brat, especially, it's like if I want something, I'm gonna make it happen, whether that's me going behind somebody's back. And I'm not even on no like snake, shady, whatever. It's just, I was
Kids are sneaky.
sneaky.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Kids are sneaky and can
Sneaky.
be, and you definitely were. I'm glad that you didn't attempt to like sneak out of the house or anything. I don't know
Oh,
that you ever would have like succeeded because
no.
it was like Fort Knox up in there. So
And yeah, it's like she had cameras, the alarm system. I wouldn't have been able to make it anyways. Like,
exactly.
and I've thought about it. I have thought about it. Like, I used to think to myself, this particular window in my room doesn't have the alarm thing. So if I open it and I break the screen out, I just need to find a way to get back up to the roof so that I can get on the second floor to get back in my.
Yeah, good
Girl,
luck with that.
I done thought through it all, but no, I never tried because I wouldn't have succeeded. At least I was smart enough to not
Well,
do
thank
that.
goodness.
My mama would have tore me to shreds, y'all.
Yeah.
I know we've kind of pivoted a bit and talked a little bit about a little bit of everything, but I do want to bring us back to our generational norms and things like that and how you think that has affected your dating life from the time that those norms were present versus now.
Yeah. I think for me, the normal thing, and I'll start in my teen years because I started dating. I had my first real boyfriend at like 15.
And what's crazy is my mama wouldn't have let that have been me at 15. That's crazy.
Times were very different. Very different when you were 15 versus when I was 15.
We could talk about that after, but go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, so my first boyfriend, I was 15. And it was more just go to the movies, that type of thing. Again, the technology wasn't developed like it is today. So it's just talking on the phone. If he came over, like the family was there. It wasn't like we were somewhere.
Did you have moments where your like 15-year-old boyfriend came over to your house?
Yeah,
Wow.
he wasn't 15, but
How old was he?
18.
Wow. Okay.
And then I'll just say when I was 16, I would say my high school sweetheart was the guy I dated from like 16 to I'll say 17, but it was a pretty long relationship to be 16. It was probably
is.
about a year and a half. My high school sweetheart, and my family loved him. So yeah, he would come over. I would go to his house. His parents loved me. Yeah, we spent a lot of time together to be the ages that we were. So those were my first real memories and real dating experiences was 15, 16.
Okay. And why do you think that, or what makes you say that times were different when you were 15 versus when I was 15? And I wasn't actively dating at the age of 15 or looking to, but what makes it so different for you?
I think one, first of all, I didn't date guys from my high school. Like I just didn't like. Now I will say that my high school sweetheart, he was in high school, but he went to a neighboring high school, right? But we met probably, I don't even remember, maybe at a football game or something like that.
A
So
lost art again.
again, yeah, meeting in person, like, that's definitely a lost art that we need to get back to, I will say.
Absolutely.
But it was just different in that I feel like in your generation, I'll say, things were a lot different because times were just different. I
Hmm.
feel like people back then were just a little more genuine. And the older we've gotten and as we've kind of transitioned through the years, people just aren't as authentic as they used to be. They aren't as forgiving. They aren't as upfront. And there's a lot of games that are being played. There's a lot of just people who are out to get something from you.
Hmm.
And it was more for me at your age in like 15, 16 high school years, it was more protection. It wasn't that I didn't want you to date or that I didn't feel like you were ready. It was just being more of a protective parent where a lot of those guys, in my opinion, and I'm not just saying in the neighborhood, because I felt like we lived in a fairly decent neighborhood.
And you knew the kids and their parents too. It was a very community based neighborhood, I would say.
Yeah, but the other kids that maybe were in surrounding neighborhoods, a lot of them were a little bit more wild, and I just didn't know that I wanted you to be involved in that type of crowd. So I was probably a little more keep you close to home than, just kind of letting you go out there and do what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely understand that, especially now. I mean, back then I probably didn't because yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like, when I was at that age and especially in that time, I felt like I couldn't do nothing. Like I couldn't go with my friends, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. But being at the age that I'm at now and, hearing your perspective, it does make sense. And honestly, I think a lot of people, especially my age, they just go through those realizations and they're like, I'm glad my mom was protective and did this
Yeah.
because you look at the kids today that are
That
doing
their parents weren't like that.
right, and
Yeah.
they're doing any and everything. It's like you look at a 15-year-old and she looked my age, and I'm like, all this makeup. And I'm not bashing kids, or teenagers who are, coming into their age and things like that. They want to try makeup and wear
Yeah.
their bust down lace fronts and all that.
Not the
Do
bust
you
down.
do you boo look good? Wear your 30 millimeter lashes, all that great. But I wasn't wearing that in middle school, high
And I wouldn't have
school.
let you. Like, I just feel like let kids be kids,
Hmm.
and I'm not saying keep them as kids, let them explore
Yeah.
and figure out things and be, have their own identity and
Baby
things like that.
steps.
Yeah, baby steps. I just think that some parents just, they want to be friends too fast.
Yes, I agree with that. And we could save that for another
That's a
conversation.
whole
That's a
topic
whole
by
nother
itself.
conversation by itself. I agree. But as far as like we talked about with the lost arts and things like that, as you've gotten older and you've started to the whole technology thing and things like that, how have you noticed your dating life change over the years?
I would say it's a little more difficult now. But I also think that my personality plays into that
Hmm.
because, as I mentioned, I'm an introvert. So you would think that maybe it would help or enhance because I can just get online and I can, go to a website or to a dating app or whatever. But by the same token, I also think that because I'm an introvert, it is, I don't want to say a deterrent, but it can be a hindrance because I don't want to talk to any and everybody. And I definitely don't want to like be online talking to you for days on end before I meet you. That is one of the things that I enjoyed about the older days. You met people more so in person, whether you were at a football game or at the grocery store or at the gym or, so many at work. I mean,
Yeah.
so now I work from home, so, and I mentioned I'm a homebody. So it's just today is more difficult, one, to just meet people. But also, I think it sounds good in theory that the dating apps are out there and that it would make it easier. I think it makes it easier for a certain group. I feel like if you're more outgoing, that it
Hmm.
could be easier. But for someone like myself, who, I'm pretty reserved and I don't necessarily want to, I don't know, I ain't gonna lie, just put the forth the energy to swipe and swipe and swipe. Like, I don't want to do that all day. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Meeting people in person, again, we're talking about lost art forms. That's one of them.
Yeah, and also think that even in today's age, whatever, that I think a lot of that derives from people fearing rejection, especially men, because I think that, or not everyone, but people are starting to realize that dating apps suck and people are just on there just to
Hook
get
up.
attention, hook up, pass time because they're bored. There's no
Yeah.
real intention
Yeah.
behind, getting on the dating app. So people are starting to realize these suck. I want to meet more people in person, and I'm a victim to it. It's like we try to find hobbies to get us out the house. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to go to the gym. And I hate that it's kind of turning into, oh, I'm finding hobbies because I want to find my husband instead of me trying to
Have a hobby for the reason
enjoy
of having a
the
hobby.
hobby.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, I think that's where the dating is starting to shift into, is that, yeah, we had a period where the apps were really popular and things like that. People are now starting to realize that the apps are not doing what they need to do because the people on there are not genuine, they're not intentional. So now we're trying to find people in person, but now it's like I have to find all these things to do so that I can get out there. But then the guys don't approach anymore because they, don't want to get rejected. But it's like that's what the whole courting process,
Yeah.
and and I think you and I both kind of have a more traditional mindset when it comes to that kind of stuff, where we want men to approach us.
For sure.
Yeah, when it comes to dating and getting to know people and stuff. But obviously some men are kind of just like, oh well, I don't want to approach you at the gym and you're so in your zone and things like that you're not paying me any attention, or like I don't want to get shut down and rejected because if you reject me at the gym, or if we do decide to kick it, whatever, and then it doesn't work out, now I feel like I gotta go find a new gym so I don't see you ever again. Like those are the type of things I see on like social media with like threads
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And even just thinking about what dating apps looked like back then versus how they look today. Um, I can tell you, even I'll say like late 90s, early 2000s. So this was probably, I'll say early 2000s. So shortly after you were a baby, obviously. I was dating, your dad and I didn't work out, and, he moved on, I moved on. Um, but even in thinking about what that looked like back then, it was like websites. It wasn't like we didn't have apps back then. Okay. So websites like Black Planet. Do you even know what Black Planet? Oh my gosh.
no.
Black Planet. It's almost like a Black people meet.
Okay.
But I don't even think Black Planet was a dating site. We turned it into a dating site. But yeah, it was more like websites where you put up a profile, and that was, to me, was like the second iteration, or maybe a few iterations after like the bulletin boards that I experienced in college, because you could put up pictures and profiles and things like that. So dating apps, I feel like, morphed from the dating websites. But I think even back then it was just an easier way to meet people. Even if you weren't looking to date per se, it was, to me, an easier way to meet people and to find people with like interests. The internet is really just kind of exploding at this time. So it was, everybody starting to jump on and get on the bandwagon. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I feel like what that looked like back then versus what it looks like today, like you said, today, in my mind, I agree with you that no one's taking it serious. It's just either a way to hook up, or people, maybe they want pen pals. We could have did that 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Okay, I'm not looking for a pen pal anymore. Like, I'm looking for my husband.
Right.
I'm looking to be found, just to be clear. But yeah, I just think it's the next evolution.
Yeah. So, with that being said, do you think that if social media was around during the time that you were growing up dating in your like prime teen to mid 20s ish years that it would look a lot different or would have looked a lot different for you?
First of all, let me just say, praise God that social media was not around back when we were teenagers and early 20s. It was just kind of kicking off with the websites and stuff, like in my early 20s. But yeah, for sure, I think it would have been very different because I don't know. I just feel like today everything is almost accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
And back then, you were at least, if I wanted to know something about you, I pretty much had to ask you.
Right.
Like, I had to have a conversation with you to learn more about you, to get, those intimate details that, we want to know about somebody that we're trying to get to know or that we're interested in. Today, all that stuff is online. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing.
It's a lost art though, I feel like still. Like I feel like that's our like topic of the day is just dating as all of this being a lost art essentially because that just goes back to like the conversation piece like you said it's
Yeah.
like conversation is a lost art at this point as well. Like people don't know
Yeah.
how to sit down, have thorough engaging conversations
Right.
and
It's
really
like pulling
make
teeth today.
yeah exactly and really make that aspect of dating enjoyable.
Yeah. I don't know. I just like back then, I'm like jogging my memory, just trying to think back to how I experienced different people or, got to know different people. And um, I'll be the first to tell anyone, like, I'm not a phone person. Like, I don't like, I'm not gonna say I don't like talking on the phone, but like, I'm not one to pick up the phone and call. She's the only person I call, like, or talk to on a regular basis, meaning like every day. If I had a man, sure, like that's just normal. But in terms of like just having friends, male or female, and even family members, I don't talk to anybody on a regular basis. But back then, I probably talked a little bit more or, was more engaging with just friends, family, men that I was dating. And not to say I was dating a whole bunch of men at the same time, but just over the course of time. It was just different. And I feel like today, it's just not like that. And I think it's just a morph of myself, not just the times, but also just me changing into who I am today. And, I feel like I'm way more introverted than I even was back then. And I don't even know how that like came to be, but it's definitely a thing where I'm just a little more secluded or just kind of to myself. Like I feel like in today's age, maybe because there's such this prevalence of social media and all this information out there that I don't want to put like a lot of
Right.
stuff out there,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's just interesting how the times and technology changes you as a person, not just the times and the technology is changing and growing and expanding. It changes you as well as a person.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you felt like, you may have become more of an introvert as you've gotten older, but it does make sense because like you said, everything is on the internet. So it's like you kind of might want to be a little more private these days,
Yeah.
with everything. I don't want to say with everything that's going on, but just, the time that we're in with technology for sure. Which is very interesting.
Yeah.
I'll say from my experience with dating, and social media, it just, I don't know. I dating is interesting for me at this age that I'm at right now, especially with social media. And it's like, every so often new apps come out and things like that, like Threads just released within the last couple of year or two. So it's just interesting because at one point, we weren't, it's almost like we're using social media to date as well. It's not
And not
even
just the dating apps.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Because even when people get on Threads, they're like, oh, Threads is a dating app.
Well, sliding in the DMs, and that what that's all about, supposedly?
Well, Threads ain't got no DMs, but since it is linked to Instagram, yeah, I have found that like somebody will see me on Threads and come follow me on Instagram and be like, "Hey, I saw you on Threads. I thought you were cute, and just wanted to hit you up." And I mean, I'm not against it or opposed to it if a man is, willing to put himself out there and get to know me and shoot his shot, as we would say. But again, I just really would appreciate more of the in-person,
I agree.
interactions and things like that, because I just think that even when we talked about like writing the love letters and things like that, men were so romantic back in the day.
Or they didn't have a choice.
Or they didn't have a choice, as they shouldn't. But it's like, also, you would think that since the internet is so prevalent and, these guys have all these resources to utilize with dating, that, it wouldn't be that hard for men to be romantic in this day and age. It's
You
like
would
y'all,
think.
you would think.
Yeah.
It's like y'all have all these TikToks, Pinterest boards and things.
Everything at your fingertips.
At your fingertips.
Yeah.
And you still don't, I won't say you still don't get it right, but you still don't get it right. It's like there are so many things that you can do to, court a woman, wow a woman, and things like that. But I just think courting, again, is just a lost art at this point.
It really is. And it's not just your generation.
Yeah.
It's like across the board, men my age, they don't get it. And it's like, you grew up in the same time that I
Right.
grew up in. So what happened?
Right. I was going to say the same thing. What did happen? Because if you grew up in the 90s and you had to go through that time period of where you had to send letters
Yeah.
and send pictures in the mail and things like that, and you actually had to meet people in person and go that route, are y'all just lazy now? Like,
I
are
think
y'all
so. I
just
think that-
getting comfortable, complacent? What is it?
I think that's part of it. I think also the laziness, and I'm not saying, again, I'm just making a statement, a generalization, but it is very easy to be lazy. And I'm not speaking just for the men. I mean, across the board, men, women, everything. So I think it's easy to just send a DM. It's easy, because if they do get rejected in the DM versus getting rejected in person, maybe it's not as much of a hit to the ego or, what have you. So I kind of get it, but guys, we really like it when you approach us and be respectful with it.
Right. It's a way to go about it. And, we're not speaking for all women. Obviously, we're speaking for ourselves before we speak for anybody else. But because we know that not all women want to get approached in the gym. Not all women want to get approached at the grocery store, things like that.
I do.
Read the room. I do. Shoot,
I do.
I do. if you want to.
Listen.
Okay. But read the room. Like, I think that if you making eye contact, one thing about me, I'm going to make eye contact a few times. I was going to say I'm not going to come to you, but I have been a bit more open to letting a guy know that I'm interested first. Like, if I see a man that's handsome in the grocery store or just when I'm out, like I was out with my girlfriends the other night at one of the bars in Charlotte. By the way, something we didn't mention is that we're based in Charlotte.
Yeah.
For the people that don't know. But we were just hanging out because one of my friends was working, and I saw this guy that was just sitting down hanging out, and I just told him, I just wanted to let you know you are so handsome. And that was it. I walked away. No room for rejection for me. It's just like I put the ball in his court. If he wanted to, you know what I mean,
And that's
come
a great
back.
way to do it.
Yeah.
Like,
If he wanted to come back, spin a block and be like, hey, I really, appreciate your compliment, whatever. Would love to get your number, blah, 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 then fine. But I don't know. I feel like guys can appreciate things like that too, though.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time as women, we have the expectation that men approach us, which I don't know if I want to call it an expectation, but that's what we like. That's what we would like to happen. But I do think that there is something to be said for men who, it's okay to compliment a man, and they eat it up.
They eat it up, honey.
They will eat it up. So I will take that mental note that maybe, that's something that I can do going forward. If there's someone, just a nice compliment, like, I like your shirt, or, it doesn't even have to be, I think you're so handsome. And I'm not saying that I would never do that, but, just the
Smallest,
simplest.
the smallest thing make men happy.
For sure.
Yeah. Cool.
I've never been good at ego stroking. So
and I get that from her.
Yeah, I
get
have
that from you
never
real
been
bad.
good at ego stroking. And to me, not to say that a compliment is stroking his ego, but that's probably why I don't think to do it, because I've just never been good at it. So
Right, yeah.
maybe that's something that I can, kind of work on a little bit.
Yeah. Any final words as far as dating then versus now? And
Why is it so different?
Why
Those
is
are
it so
my
difficult?
well, oh, that's a good one. That yeah, those are my final words is a question. Why is it so different? Why is it so difficult? Why do we as people, and I'm not going to exclude men or women, why do we make it so different and difficult than, of course you don't have that history to know how it was back then, but well, I don't understand why it's so difficult today to just genuinely meet someone, get to know them, and if you just become friends, okay, I've made a new friend.
Right.
Why is it always, not always, but why is it often that if we aren't hooking up, or you're not going to be my woman, or you're not going to be my man, then we can't even like have a conversation, we can't be cool or whatever? Whatever happened to platonic friends?
Ugh.
Because guess what? I know we were supposed to be wrapping up, but this just kind of brought up a thought that a lot of the time your friends can introduce you to someone else. Like you have a platonic friend and they, y'all are real cool and they kind of know your personality. Is that not the perfect person to kind of hook you up with someone? Not really hook you up, but, introduce you to a friend or someone they know, maybe a family member. Tell me about your uncle, or, so I'm just saying, like, whatever happened to platonic friends?
I was gonna say, I think that's a lost art too. Just the fact that since we aren't having those relationships, like people are not meeting people from other people, like
Yeah.
mutual friends, like people, a lot of people, especially within the last couple of years before dating got to be so complex for no reason at that, it was like people were meeting their fiancés, their husbands, their wives, and people like that because their friend just knew
Through
somebody.
other people. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I have yet to experience, honestly, myself. It's like people,
It's been a minute since I've been introduced to someone by a friend
right?
or a family member, or,
Like, hey, I think this person, I think you and this person would get along really well. Y'all have similarities and
yeah.
blah, blah, blah. I think y'all should, I'll give you his number or X, Y, and Z, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just also, as my final thought or whatever, I would just say, I just think that dating is supposed to be fun and it's not. And it sucks.
Facts.
Yeah.
Facts on facts.
Yeah. And I feel like, we've talked about the social media aspects and, the dating apps and things like that. I think those things do take the fun out of, have taken. They don't intentionally do that, but with
Sure.
the people that, have, kind of had those overlapping whatevers, I just think that, there are certain aspects of social media and dating apps that take the fun out of dating. And that's why it's exhausting. That's why you don't want to sit and scroll and swipe through all these
Yeah.
people and things like that, because it really can be draining.
Yeah. What do you propose, or how do we get back to making dating fun again?
I just think it goes, well, for one, I'll say that I think that people need to get back to being their authentic selves. Like, I definitely think that there are a lot of games, like you said earlier,
Yeah.
being played when it comes to dating.
I agree.
And especially going back to social media, people come on social media and they say, girl, if you want to wow this man or whatever, do X, Y, and Z. Don't do this. Instead, do this. And it's like, if I have to think about 1,000,001 things in my head while I'm getting to know somebody, and I have to make sure I don't do this and I have to do this instead of me being my authentic self and them falling for me being my authentic self,
Yeah.
I don't want it. That is so exhausting to have to think to be almost someone else just for somebody else to even like you or want to date you or anything like that.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting that you say that, because I feel like that for me is one of the reasons why I kind of dislike using the dating apps. Like I'll do it for a while and I won't even say I get bored with it. I get more so frustrated with it, because it's almost like people want you to be somebody else. Like,
It's almost cookie cutter, almost like
yeah,
they expect all women to act a certain way or
exactly.
present themselves a certain way. And it's like, y'all are missing the point that everybody is unique and different in their own way. And
For
that's what
sure.
makes everybody beautiful in their own way.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the lost art of meeting people in person, I feed off of vibes and understanding what type of connection. How do I feel when I'm in your presence? That is of the utmost importance to me when I'm considering someone in a dating capacity, because we can talk on the phone all day. I'll tell you now, I'm dry as hell on the phone. Like I already told y'all, I don't like to talk on the phone like that, especially with people that I'm just getting to know. It's
Right.
just, I won't say difficult for me, but it's just not. I don't know, it's not fun really, like
You just don't
trying
enjoy it. Yeah.
basically in, in its simplest form. You're right. I don't really enjoy it. And I think again, that's just because I want to understand how do you make me feel in your presence?
Right.
And when I meet someone in person, there's either I won't say an instant connection, but there's an instant energy. Now, the connection may grow or not from that, but at least there's some type of energy transfer that happens when you meet someone in a physical sense in person. And for me, that is like the epitome of like how I want to meet my husband.
Yeah, I agree. Bring back in-person interactions.
Please.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Period. Okay. All right, so we do want to introduce our weekly segment at this time. So we thought it would be a cute idea for us to start doing weekly segments and have different segments and kind of rotate through those. So we are calling that our mixtape shuffle. So hopefully you guys will, just have fun with us, and be engaging with us and things like that. At some point, we do plan on introducing a segment where you guys send us in questions, stories, things like that, and we give you guys our responses or reactions and things like that. But for this week, our episode of the Mixtape Shuffle is our segment called Mother Knows Best, or Does She? Question mark. So today's topic for today's episode on the Mixtape Shuffle is, what do you think about ghosting? And is there ever a situation where it's okay?
My initial thought is there's never a situation. However,
However,
comma. What do I think about ghosting? I think that there is a way to end, I'll say, a relationship, whether, you're in a relationship, a friendship, a getting to know you
a
ship, whatever.
situationship.
Yeah. I think there's a way to end things without necessarily just dropping off the face of the earth, right? I think that if people were authentic and if people were just grown-ups, then they would know that not every situation is meant to work out. Not every situation is meant to be. And I think when we keep those things in mind, you don't have to ghost anybody. You can just simply tell them, I really have enjoyed getting to know you. Unfortunately, I'm just not feeling X, Y, and Z, whatever it is about that person. And you wish them well and you move along about your way. Is there ever a situation where ghosting is okay? In my mind, I'm going to say no. However, I feel like maybe I've ghosted a person or two. So I guess I would be totally hypocritical if I said that ghosting was not okay and then I've actually, probably ghosted a person or two.
I think two things can be right at the same time, though. Ghosting can not be okay, and then
And
you
you
can,
do it.
yeah, I think
Okay.
that can exist.
Yeah, I can go with that. So if I had a preference, I would prefer someone to tell me, especially if we have been communicating for some time, there's been some type of time investment, interest, all of that sort of stuff, then I think a conversation is just the way to do it. It doesn't have to be lengthy. You don't even have to tell me, 10 reasons why you don't want to talk to me anymore. I just think that be an adult.
Right.
And that's part of being an adult, is having difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'll say, and then I'll ask your opinion, do I know best or maybe I don't. Sometimes in my own experience, when I do have those tough conversations, I feel better about myself after the fact because I was an adult, I communicated, and I didn't just leave somebody hanging. So sometimes, and I can have a real guilty conscience, which I think is a good thing. So when I do have those difficult conversations, while in the moment it's difficult, almost immediately after, I'm like proud of myself for having had that difficult conversation, or just, saying how I feel or saying what it is. So in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have ghosted. Can't say that I'll never do it again. But I don't think it's okay, but I can understand why some people do it. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. And I agree with you on that. Honestly, I honestly am on the same page that I don't think it's okay. But I have ghosted a few people in my lifetime. But honestly, for me, it's just because I hate having difficult conversations. Like, I am very, I just don't like uncomfortability.
Non-confrontational. We have that in
Yes.
common as well.
Yeah. And we're both non confrontational, like she said. So it's like, I would prefer to have a conversation and things like that. But also, I just take into account like how would it make somebody feel if I said certain things, and I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. So my brain goes a million places in one
Yeah.
as a reason not to have those conversations, because I would just rather avoid all of the uncomfortability, the confrontation, and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's why I end up ghosting people. I'm not saying it's okay, but just to give some perspective as to why I do it. But I agree. I mean, like you said, it's important to be an adult and have a conversation. And like you said, half the times, more than half the times, once you get it off your chest, it's literally like a burden is lifted off you, because you don't have to
Yes.
worry about the person anymore. You don't have to worry about them hitting you up and being like, hey,
And
saw.
pretending that you still like them,
Right,
or,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with that.
Okay, so mother does know best in this instance.
Okay, so after today's episode, you guys got to know a little bit about us and our dating preferences and what dating looked like for you back in the day versus now. And, just have an idea of just our thoughts on dating altogether. So I think today we had a really good conversation.
Yeah.
And we were able to just really voice and speak on, just our views on dating, and how it has shifted throughout our generation and time and things like that. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, that's a wrap on today's episode of the mixtape. Be sure to follow us on social media on Instagram at the MD, M as in mother, D as in daughter, mixtape on Instagram. You can also find us on YouTube at the MD mixtape as well. And we are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well.
For sure.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you in the next episode.